if you don't own your life, if you don't create it, if you're not the one that says yes and no, if you're not the one that is willing to take risks, push the edges, make mistakes, take your wins and celebrate, then who's going to do it? Nobody is. And you're going to end up one day waking up and going, what happened to my life?
Welcome to The King Within, a podcast for men who seem to have it all, yet feel like they're losing what matters most. I'm Mike Salemi and I've been there. Successful on paper but disconnected on the inside. This isn't about grinding harder. It's about mastering your emotions, leading with calm strength, and rebuilding trust at home. Each week we dive into real stories and tools for becoming the man your family runs towards, not away from. Because you didn't build this life to lose yourself in it. This is The King Within. Let's do the work. Welcome to The King Within. I'm Mike Salemi. Today we're recording on the land in Mount Shasta with Tim Corcoran, founder of Headwaters Outdoor School and author of the Earth Caretaker Way, where for over 3 decades he's guided men and young people through wilderness rites of passage. Tim's path has taken him from training elephants from the original Star Wars movie to sitting in sweat lodges with the Flathead Elders at age 10. In this conversation, we explore the hero's journey, the practice of deep listening, building a personal code of honor, and what it means to create a life well lived. We'll also dive into why nature is our greatest teacher, how men can reclaim their role as earth caretakers, and the courage required to truly live at your edge. Let's get into it.
So going back to one thing that you just said, so you were in the first Star Wars?
Yeah, the kids that come to the school love it. 'Cause believe it or not, they still watch that movie all the time. The very first one, episode 4.
How did you get into it?
Well, I trained elephants at Marine World Africa USA in Redwood City back then. And that's a whole other story, but I had like 10 elephants. And one of them was named Margie. And we got this call from the Hollywood boys, and they said that they're making a movie called Star Wars, and they wanted to. They asked if they could build a costume around her and make her into what's called a bantha, which was in the movie. And banthas were ridden by these guys called Sandmen or Tusken Raiders, which were the bad guys, right? So it took 2 months to build the costume around her. It literally covered her entire body. I mean, she was an amazing being, Margie. And we fed her a case of French bread every day and a case of apples, and she would let us do it, and just give her lots of love. And then we got the call to go to Death Valley, and I load her into a big semi truck. I ride in the back of the semi with the elephant the whole way. The driver was an incredible guy. We drove all the way to Death Valley. It was, a full day's drive in the back with her. And we get out, and we have a 15-second scene where, in the movie, where I jump off a cliff onto the back of a bantha. And that bantha is her, and I'm a Tusken Raider. And little did we know at the time that it was going to be the most famous movie ever. And, what's really interesting is that movie was really about the hero's journey. Mm-hmm. And that's what my life's been about and teaching, right? Little did I know then. Finding yourself, creating your life, and doing something meaningful. That's the hero's journey, right? And that's what that whole movie was about. Yeah. So it's so funny how everything connects that way. And then, here's the greatest part, too. After we were done with the movie, filming our scene, we're driving back, and we stop in the Mojave Desert. I asked the driver to stop. He was a great guy. His name was Red. He was an old cowboy. A side note, he used to take a bullwhip, and he'd knock like I didn't smoke, but I'd put a cigarette in my mouth, and he'd knock it out, whip it out. And I'm like, talk about trust.
Oh, man.
His name was Red. And I said, let me go into the Mojave Desert for a couple of days camping. I get on the back of the elephant, I go into the wilderness. I'd pass backpackers on the trail and not even say something. And they'd see me with an elephant, I'd ride in. We camped for a few days in there, and then I came out.
What was it like having a relationship with an animal like that?
Elephants are one of the most, I was lucky. I got to train elephants and chimpanzees. And, a lot of animal rights people over the years have stopped those kind of things like circuses and shows. And I understand that because a lot of animals are treated pretty poorly in those kinds of situations. But there at Marine World, the animals had love beyond love. And it was like beyond a life's honor to be let into their world and work with them. I get teary thinking about it. I miss it. I remember the first time I was told by the trainer who left. That's where I took over out of nowhere, right? I was just 20-year-old. I look at these 20-year-olds today, and I sometimes can't imagine they could do that. He said, going back to the trainer, says you got to go into the elephant barn. One of the main things you do is clean their poop up. They poop 22 times a day.
Oh, man.
And there's this big bull African elephant, which no one had ever trained before, named Samson, 14 feet tall at the show. And he said, you got to go by him, and he's got to accept you. And he took me and threw me against the wall with his tusk, and I thought I was going to die. And I got up, and he said, you got to fight him. And so I went at him.
You got to fight him?
You got to fight him. You got to make him respect you. Remember, I'm 20 years old. I didn't know any of this. And I was good with animals my whole life, but farm animals and dogs and wild animals. But so I run up to him after I'd been knocked against the wall. I had a rake for cleaning, and I attacked him with the rake. And a joke, this is a 14-foot, 8,000-pound elephant, right? And I accidentally, don't get mad at me, the rake hit him in the eye. And he roared up like a roar. And there were 6 other elephants in the barn with me. And he came down, his eye was fine, and we were like blood brothers from that day.
Wow.
I would literally go in the barn and sleep with him all night long. It was like, I can't even begin to tell you how lucky I was and loved them totally. And he ended up getting moved to a zoo in L.A. with a huge amount of space and like 6 females that lived happily ever after. Sam, that's just one story of thousands. I still sometimes can't even believe, am I telling the truth? Did I really do that? And I did,
Well, I know, like, as I was reading your book, The Earth Caretaker Way, like, one of the things is you dedicated the book to the earth. And from everything that I know about you, because now we've spent a bit of time together, this is, I think, my third or fourth time up here. Nature has been one of your biggest teachers, if not your greatest teacher. Can you walk me through how or when did first nature become your teacher? When did you have that awareness, and what was that journey like in the early days?
I guess one way I could start is my parents. We grew up in Sunnyvale, which is now the Silicon Valley.
It's not too far from me.
Yeah. But then it was not. Then it was orchards, woods, creeks. Great place to grow up. Wonderful. And unlike a lot of kids today, our parents would just let us out the door in the morning, and we'd see them at night. And there's no cell phones checking on you, and the community kind of looked after you. So there was nature everywhere, and so I was always out in the woods somewhere. In our own backyard, we had like a quarter of an acre, and we had part of it was an orchard. And I remember my job for the family was to grow a garden. So I became a gardener at a young age. So I learned to talk to plants, grow them, nurture them. I had fruit trees that I had a tree house in the backyard. So there was that part. Then I think the biggest part is, and this is something I see lost today a lot too, is I had elders and mentors in my life that took me on seriously to teach me about nature. And one of the biggest ones was my grandfather, who lived in Ronan, Montana, which is right next to and kind of surrounded by the Flathead Indian Reservation. And the Flathead people, they were called the Flatheads because they would shave their hair flat on top. And the town was in the reservation kind of, and my grandfather had a homestead, so I stayed with him in the summers and learned to take care of the cows and the sheep and the goats and grow plants. But again, we had complete freedom. I'd go out and fish all day in the river. And the Native American people, the Indian people there, the Flatheads knew me, and everybody knew everybody. So one day I'm out, so I felt very safe, just to wander and be in the woods. And that's so much about, if I really think about it, what's the most important part? To remember that nature is the teacher. And so my time being in nature, I was being taught, if I'm open to receiving the teachings in nature, different than you and I talking, it's more energetic. But so the connection is always there. Even for adults, you have to be out in it, and be open to being taught. And I was. And so one day I'm walking along. I just fished all morning, and that was a great teacher, learning to fish creeks. And I hear a sound, and I'm looking through these bushes, and I see these 3 Native American elders tending a fire. And they look at me, and I'm thinking I'm in trouble for, spying on them, right? And they give me this wonderful look, warmth look, and they call me in, and I come to the fire, and they're doing this thing called a sweat lodge. And I didn't know that then, I was 10.
10 years old.
Yeah. And so they invite me in. I call it the Earth Caretaker Way. They also used a term similar to that for a way of living your life. And it started clearly in my brain then in that sweat lodge. And I knew that my path was going to be caretaking the earth and developing a deep relationship with the earth. It was going to take over my entire life. And I knew it then in that sweat. And I went back subsequent summers and through till about 13 and did more sweats with them. I fell in love with the sweat lodge.
Even at 10 years old, do you recall back to that first sweat? Like, were you anxious, afraid? What, for those that aren't familiar with what a sweat is, maybe you can just briefly or in depth go into that. Yeah.
Well, a sweat lodge is a sacred ceremony. It's like it's a dome shape covered with a dome shaped out of sticks covered with cloth. In the old days, the Native Americans would have used animal hide, and it's where you heat up rocks in front of the sweat in a fire, and then you bring the rocks into the sweat, and then you sit in there, close the door. It's pitch black, and you sing songs and pray with the earth. That's simplifying. It's an amazing ceremony. And most Native American tribes did some type of a sweat. The sweat lodge was done by some of my ancestors. The Irish did sweats. The Russian people did sweats. Most of the northern climates had some kind of a sacred ceremony where you'd go in and have a sweat lodge. Like a sauna, but very sacred and extreme heat, really hot. Makes you stay right in the moment.
The sweat lodge specifically, like one of the things, like now we run a full retreat here for guys. We're about to come back in 2 days got 16 guys coming in 2 days for a sweat. So the sweat lodge is really how I first heard about you or found you. And it is really different than a sauna. Like, yes, it's heat, but I think that's an important distinction to make. And so it's also really interesting that all of these different cultures that you're saying around the world had their version of it. And I think one of the key ingredients is that sacredness, is that ceremony. But going back to when you were 10 years old, what can you share about what that was like at that age? Because, most 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds are going to be faced with their edge in a sweat. So I'm just imagining, like, what was it like as 10 years old?
Well, I'm sure the 3 elders that took me in that first sweat, they were gentle on me. But it still seemed terrifying in some ways.
Yeah.
But they were so welcoming. I was trained and learned to grow up to trust elders. And so I trusted them. So it took away a lot of the anxiety. And yes, I got hot, I got scared, but I went through it, and it was purely magical for me. And a sweat lodge is like nature being the teacher. Loving nature is one thing. In the sweat lodge, it's like you get it extra, 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 right? So you're infused with nature, with a respect for it, with a love for it. It's almost like you're injected with nature, And then you come out and you're just in awe. The world looks new and fresh. And to do that at that age. And I was trying to think of it and I've forgotten, but they called the sweat lodge way. As they said, live the sweat lodge way. And to me, that was the Earth Caretaker way, which I wrote the book, The Earth Caretaker Way. It all could track it right back to them saying, live the sweat lodge way, which is the way of the earth. It's loving the earth, caring for the earth, but not just that, it's working for the earth.
And that's what you've dedicated your whole life to since 10 years old.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm curious about, because you've talked about elders, and I love the sweats that you do, the land that you're on here. All of my retreats for the last 5-6 years have been in Mount Shasta, because every single time that I'm on this area of land, I feel like something switches inside me. And I know that many of the guys have said the same thing. Like this area, this land holds everybody, holds this type of work. But in addition to that, like, I really consider you a wise elder. Like, I know when we were here last time, like, I mean, there's not a tremendous amount of what I would say are elders with a capital E. And so when you were saying at a young age you learn or were taught to trust your elders, what if someone's looking for an elder? Like, how do they know, like, what makes an elder to you, especially for someone today in the modern world who's looking for some of these wisdom teachings? How do you find an elder? Or how do you know what would constitute that?
That's an incredibly great question. I actually think that I just turned 70 this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm learning to be an elder myself. I wouldn't even say I'm there yet. I'm kind of moving from a serious mentor to being an elder. And so I'm in the discovery process. But I think it's someone who's willing to be an incredible listener, live by example, inspire people to be their better selves, and to have an energy you put out that you're available. And a lot of it, like if people come, young people come and talk, I want to get ideas from an elder, you have to really be non-judgmental. That opens the door for people to really share and learn. And that's a life journey for me. The importance of being non-judgmental is one of the greatest teachings I've ever learned, and also the hardest. I often make a joke and say, if you've been able to do it 10% in your entire life, you've done well. Because humans love to be judgmental. But it keeps, when we're judgmental, that stops growth right there when the judgment comes in. And then you miss so much. So if you can just not be judgmental and be open, and that puts an energy out so that people will feel safe to talk and share. And so there's that, being willing and have the energy there to be available without being judgmental is so important where people will come. We're in a time now where, just in my lifetime, we've seen the idea of mentors and elders almost become kind of a sideline, where if you go back to Native American days and before, elders were the glue that held it all together for a community. And mentoring was considered vitally important. And no matter what age you are, you could be a mentor for anybody younger than you, right? And the greatest teachings come from your actions. Your words can be great and powerful, but if your words aren't backed up by your actions, they're nothing. And I've learned that all people do this, but young people particularly watch a person's actions, and they learn a lot from observing. So I think that's really, really an important one. And then the other thing is being really truthful. Not just if an elder, you don't just want to sound good all the time, like everything's. Tell your story. Tell the hardships you've had, the difficulties, and be willing to share that part of your life. It's not all about looking good, It's about being real. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's not about having it all together. It's about being real with your journey. And that's something that, I mean, my son, as you know, Luca's 2.5 years old, and I can't wait for him to, well, he might stop by in the next few days, but I can't wait for him to participate in some of what you got going here for kids. That's one of the things I'm honestly most interested in, because you do vision quests, nature-based rites of passage, you got the scout camp, survival skills, wilderness skills. That's something, taking young people, and even adults, but taking young people through their own hero's journey, through their own adversary moments. I'd love to hear about how do you, what goes through your head when you're taking a young boy, especially through a rite of passage? And how do you know if it's safe or right for that individual at that time? Can you walk me through what you guys do here to help prepare young boys and carry them into the next stage of their evolution?
I always remember that nature's the teacher. So I'm always aware of that, and no matter what I say or what I do, I allow time for them to learn from nature. So I plant a lot of seeds so that they get a deeper connection, but I let them have their experience. I don't over-control it. It's not about me, right? And they need to dig into that deep connection to nature in order to complete a rite of passage in a deep way. One of the challenges they have in a rite of passage is they go out and sit for 24 hours alone in the woods in a shelter that they built. It's just them. And one of the things I teach them is to talk with each plant and animal that visits them or is in their space. Get to know each being individual, because each one of those beings is an individual living being on this planet, just like us. And we forget that every single living being on the planet is just trying to do what we're trying to do, live their life. And when you get that, you realize we're all connected that way. We don't have to be the same. Not everybody has to be human. So that alone opens them up deeply, and it helps them to get through that sit. They make a commitment. The other thing they do, and we build them up to this, the sits in the later part of the time they're here, they create a code of honor to live their life by. And that might sound really simple, but one of the things kids see today is how little honor there is anymore with adults they see in the world. I mean, it's almost like laughed at now to be an honorable person. So they create these codes of honor, which I know is a lifetime for them to learn to live it. But they take that out and they really make it a part of themselves. They study it, they spend time with it. And it's kind of like our Native American ancestors said, it becomes your medicine. If you work hard enough at like practicing kindness or being of service, these are things on the code of honor, having deep integrity or coming from love, things like that. Eventually, if you practice them, and nature can often be the greatest teacher, at some point in your life, if you're committed, fully committed to it, that's another thing on a code of honor is commitment. They become you. You don't have to read it anymore. You are those things. That's your medicine, what our ancestors call it, or we might call our personality. And it's a lifetime of work. But there are these aha moments in life. I call them defining moments, when you realize something big. And often it could be that you are just a kind person. You are just a person of service. Help when help is needed, things like that. So that becomes like the foundation of the rite of passage, that code of honor, the 24-hour sit, building a deep relationship with nature, those kinds of things. So, and then there's a sweat lodge, which the sweat lodge really pushes them in a lot of ways. One of them is there's so many young people today are so willing to quit or give up right when they're at that moment where if they just go a little further, greatness happens. And sweat lodge often teaches you that, is stay with it, trust and stay with it. So there's that. Then there's a big celebration at the end, ceremony. So they see the sacredness of ceremony, and when humans are at their best, helping each other be better through ceremony and through interaction. We have 6 dogs. They're a huge part of our school. They open the hearts of the kids when they're here, and then I can come in and work some of my magic, They really do. I mean that. I don't just say that because it sounds good. Dogs are a part of the school. I planned that. That's just a quick talk about it. Then there's a big celebration at the end, and then they got the hardest thing in the world to do, right? They got to go live as men of honor, young men growing into adult men in a world, and I say this sadly, it doesn't particularly always respect that. So they could be the last man standing, and they've got to stay with that code of honor and live it.
Is there a student, because I'm imagining like most of the kids of today, because we're talking about an age, around like 11 to 13, somewhere's in there?
13, 14 and up.
13, 14 and up, okay.
12 is a little bit young. And when a rite of passage happens, it's not like they're losing their childhood. They're growing in to adulthood. So there's a period, you still get to be both the child and... Now, here's another thing, though, and modern parents struggle with letting their kids grow up. There's a huge over-control thing going on, particularly in the modern world with cell phones, constantly checking on them. We never had that, see? I'm so thankful for that. What it would be like today if I had like a cell phone, I was being tracked by my parents.
You still have a flip phone.
Yeah. Parents actually track their kids.
Yeah.
Right? We do that with one of our dogs. We have a dog who wanders, and Julie put a tracker on him. And I can't believe where that dog goes that we didn't know. Now, maybe people must be going, oh, my kid's going over there. He's going over. But they don't. And is it scary to have a kid and think, oh, yeah, something bad could happen to him? It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And yes, something could happen. But life is a risk. There's no guarantees, right?
Well, I think one of the challenging things is most kids are just so poorly trained and don't like, and that's another thing I'm really curious about, because you got all these young kids coming to you, which is just a phenomenal experience. However, what they're coming from by and large is endless hours in front of the computer, gaming, crap food, artificial lights all the time, probably little to no, like they pulled PE out of a lot of the schools. Like when I was still a kid, like we were riding bikes, we were going to the
Pulled PE.
Now they're bringing it back in for sure, but there's some schools for sure, yeah, at least in California. But when I was a kid, like we were just, my mom was like, go, go, go. So my brother and I were super active. So I'm curious if you have either a story of a kid, or I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but a kid coming from that environment to what you provide here, it's a shock. It's a shock to the system. So do you meet a lot of kids with resistance to it, or kind of not being present with the experience? And how do you navigate that? Because that's also really valuable for parents who maybe are listening to this podcast, or fathers and want, like me, like I want to bring my kid up, Luca, like with it, to remember that he is nature and all the things that you're talking about. And how do we, yeah, if there's resistance there, how do you meet that? And what advice could you give a father, for example, to help them with that?
One of the things that kids don't always learn as much as they come into their teen years from their parents. The parents become almost obstacles for them. And that's kind of normal. That's not like a bad thing. They need a community. They need teachers. They need mentors. They need elders, right? And that's one thing we discussed earlier is becoming missing in our society. So while it might offend a father, he might be trying to teach his kid something, and then the kid comes here and goes back and says, oh, Tim taught me this, and I look great, right? It's because I'm not his father. They're more willing to listen and learn. So there's that dance that goes on, like we send the kids home with a code of honor. I ask the parents, hold them to it, right? Hold them to it. That's tough to do. So there's that part. And then the other part, I'm not bragging here, but I don't know how else to say it. I have a special skill where I can work with adults and kids both and do well and it's because I'm a good listener. I really truly practice being non-judgmental, and deep listening. And then I offer advice. Like, example, years ago, people used to start coming to me when I started this school and wanting help, and I'm a self-reflector. So I was looking, I felt good. It was working. It was helping people. But I was like asking myself, I'm not a therapist. Is this okay, what I'm doing? And I realized it was. And what I learned, what I was doing was what I think a lot of people don't get. And I learned this from nature. I was a good listener. And when someone's listening or when they're faking it. And kids feel it, adults feel it. When I'm truly listening without judgment, that I care, my heart's open, that's when people open up. And it was in the listening, which was good for adults and kids, that magic would happen. And a lot of whatever we were talking about would just come clear naturally. You didn't even have to give any advice or thoughts about it. And sometimes if I would give advice, I would do that and this is another important one, like non-judgment, is being non-attached. Not being attached to, if I give you advice, it's your life. You get to take it or not. It's not a reflection of me. And when you're not attached, people take it more. They take it in more. And so that's a huge one. And the other one with kids, especially I found this with boys, girls too, but boys particularly, is working with them. If I work with them, do the dishes with them, go out and haul firewood with them, that's when a lot of the greatest connection happens in conversations. Working together, creating an art piece in nature together, climbing a tree together. I do really believe in alone time too. That's another story, but and a lot of adults today, I notice, they don't understand that, how to just really be. If I think back to my coaches, when there was PE in schools,
yeah,
they became like my friends as well as my teacher, and I respected both. I mean, I have some of the greatest teachers in my life I can remember back were coaches. Yeah.
Because they were also in it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something I remember in the last retreat when we ran here. Yeah, you were doing dishes with us. Yeah, you were a part of it. You were part of the cooking. You were part of it. And one thing that really stood out to me is there were, I think, a few occasions where you pulled me aside, and I remember I was like, holy shit. You pulled me aside and you said something to the effect of, like, tell me what you need from me. Do you need me to be more active? Would you like me to be more contributing? Or would you like, this is your show? Would you like me to back off a bit? And that was so, for me, powerful at the level of humbleness and the level of service that you show up in all of your relationships. Because I would have been like, take it to him. Like, and no, you wanted to really collaborate and hear what I had to say and hear the vision that I had and how could you, enhance that. And that, again, just meant so much to me coming from someone like you, who I would say, whether you're an elder to be or an elder who's built this whole life of experience and who I've got a lot to learn from, who wants to collaborate with me and listen to what I have to say. And so I think in part, one of the things that I've seen and felt from you is the willingness to step up and show and do what's needed to be done, even if it's washing the dishes or making fire or whatever, but then also seeing how you could be of service in any capacity. And I remember in one of the talks you gave to the guys that over those few days, you said men are at their best when they're being of service. And that really stuck with me because even when you and I were on the phone the other day, you had said, a life well lived, a life well lived. And I think that's being of service, a life well lived. I talk to guys all the time who feel lost. Like, I don't know what to do with my life. I feel lost. I don't have purpose. And so can you share, like, what is a life well lived? If a man is wondering, like, what am I here to do? I feel lost. I feel aimless. I feel disconnected, but I don't know what to do about it or how to get to on the other side. What's a life well lived to you, and how can you, share to help a guy going through that?
Wonderful question. You gotta have to stop me. I could talk for 5
No,
hours.
you go. This is the Tim show. Let's go.
No, but I'll plant some seeds. I thought about I want to start, if I write another book, my life, or I wanted to do it about this subject, a life well lived. That came to me because as I've been working with people for 50 years like this, I realize one of the biggest things that torture people is, why am I here on this earth? What am I supposed to do? How is my life going to matter? And in fact, I see that almost lost now a lot in our culture. Like, people aren't even thinking that much. It's like they don't even know what they're going to do the next day, or they fall into something like work or something, and they do it for countless years and don't even know why, right? One day they wake up, you hear about men having midlife crises,
Sure,
that kind of thing, right? So it's not supported by mentors and elders at a young age to look at your life as, I like to often say, think of your life as a masterpiece painting. You are the painter. Do you want to give that paint away to just anybody in those brushes? Be really judicious about it, and think of your life as something that you create, like a painting. You create it, and it's a work in progress. Again, it's really important to practice being non-judgmental and non-attached, because shit happens, right, on the journey. And the complication for modern people, which I don't think our ancestors had, they had other complications, is we live in a world where it's all about money and capitalism. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not sure any world belief works perfectly, right? But we grow up thinking we have what we do to make money is who we are. That's all we're about.
That's our identity.
And then we see these filthy rich people, and we all want to be rich. Like, that equals happiness. I've met countless billionaires. Having tons of money doesn't mean happiness. Happiness is something that comes from in. It's got the connection to nature. It's having love in your life, purpose in your life, making a difference. That's where happiness spawns, right? So yes, but the complication is we do have to make money to live, right? We got to have a place to live. We got to eat food. So it is a real complication. So, and how to create something in your life that you can make money and also live in a good way and make a difference in the world. That's the top if you can get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being a teacher is one of those things. But generally in the world we live in, teachers don't get paid very well, right? I'm a private school. I can do a little better, but your average teacher in the school system, they don't even have a living wage. And yet they're affecting our children the most of anybody, right? It's our whole societal way of living right now is kind of confusing. Mm-hmm. But back to creating a life means being willing to try new things, experiment, explore. Something on that code of honor I was talking about, take risks. Mm-hmm. Being willing to take risks, courage, another thing that's on that code of honor. Having the courage to try things and knowing that it might not work. But taking your life seriously and creating it is almost a thought that doesn't even come into someone's head anymore. I created my life, and I can look back at all these different moments where I did good and I didn't do good, or it was something in the middle, but I literally created, and I always made sure, and I'm not sure how or where I got this, that I was coming from integrity, and that nature was a foundational part, and I was doing something good, something better for the world. And that's a big part, is our lives are bigger than just us. And when we're open to affecting the world around us and the world itself in a wonderful way, it all comes back to the individual has a better life. Otherwise, it's just, your life is meaningless, right? And I think with our big brains and the way we are, human beings operate, we need to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. That's why community is important, if it's meaningful. I even talk to young people about something I see lost a lot today is a lot of young people don't get involved in their country. I think about, I've been troubled lately with what's happening with our country and the world. And I think about a country like a democracy. Sure, it's going to have its imperfections like anybody's life, but it doesn't work unless you are involved in it and create it. And that's the same with your own life, right? And if you don't stay involved, then it starts to fall apart. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing today on a big level, but you bring it right down to the individual. If you don't own your life, if you don't create it, if you're not the one that says yes and no, if you're not the one that is willing to take risks, push the edges, make mistakes, take your wins and celebrate, then who's going to do it? Nobody is. And you're going to end up one day waking up and going, what happened to my life? And then the other part of it is thinking of your body as a sacred thing. And it needs care. So eating well, exercising, treating your body sacred, filling your heart and your soul with ideas, dreams, hopes, spirituality, whatever that is for the individual. Nature is one of the great teachers of that, because there's no dogma. You can be spiritual. You can believe in something bigger than yourself. You can be connected to something bigger, but there's no dogma. It's the earth. It's nature. And that's a great way to start with that part of your life. So another part of it is having a spiritual side of your life, having a functional body that can go do things and create things. You have to feed your brain. And that's harder than ever in this modern world. It's simpler when I was a kid. Now with the internet and all the crap people get fed, it's harder to find what is the truth.
Right.
When I was a kid, it was easier. My heart goes out to young people today. They don't even know that, right? But so it's all those aspects of your body that you have to consider need care, need tending, need caretaking, and you got to take it serious. And a lot of people aren't doing that today, but they're not. It's not that they're bad. We have a culture that doesn't support it, and we don't have mentors and elders to help support it. So what are kids supposed to do, right? So taking your body, your life, your brain, all of it seriously, and creating it. and going through all the ups and downs. And when you get your ass kicked, learn to lick your wounds, learn your lessons, and get back up and go at it again, right?
You know, you just hit on something, and also early, that I would love for you to elaborate on. And, you know, so many guys that I talk to are so afraid. We all have fears, right? I've got fears. I work through them. They come up. But in terms of taking risk, living at your edge, finding your edge, testing your edge, and in that place, what I'm hearing from you is, and I believe this, you'll get to know more of yourself. Is there an example you can give from your life of a risk that you took? And what did you have to do to meet that risk, or to have the courage to go through it? Because so many guys, like I hear more often than not, yeah, there's definitely guys that are lost out there, don't know what they're here to do. But there's also a ton of guys that do know what they want. They do want a loving relationship with their spouse. They do want to show up as a more present father. They do want to live a purposeful life. They're just not sure how. And I think what you're saying about taking risks is a huge part where a man can develop confidence. So I know you've probably taken a ton of risks, but what's one that sticks out to you that you can share? And what insight can you provide of what you had to do or say to yourself or experience to move through that?
Hey, you asked me that question. It's funny. There probably has been a zillion, and I'm trying to come up with. It's like it's the thing that keeps popping into my brain is, it's not the things like jumping off a cliff into a lake or something like in nature, right? Those
not
are risks.
big.
Those are risks, but it's more like, I think the biggest risk, the hardest thing for me in my life has been deep relationships, particularly marriage. It's the most wonderful, credible thing when it's good in your life. And when it goes bad, it's the worst, most horrible thing, right? It's where we put everything into it, right? Relationships and marriage. And I don't mean this in any negative way. But I remember when I have a wonderful marriage now. I've been married for 27 years. My first marriage, I got married when I was, being really honest here, when I was in that Marine world, Africa, USA, and working with the elephants and the chimps. And she was a veterinary technician, and we worked together, and we almost lost our lives every day and saved each other, It was deep for 6 years. And then I remember I thought it was going to be for the rest of my life, because I'm an all-in person. That's another thing it just popped in my brain is, whatever you do, if it's meaningful, you got to be all in, 100% in, committed. It's like commitment's the huge word that goes on the code too of honor. It's like when you're fully committed, and I mean fully committed, it's almost like spirit, or whatever word you want to give it, helps you. You're not alone. But until you're fully committed, it doesn't happen very well. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And it's like climbing the mountain on Shasta. That last 1,000 feet, it's the worst 1,000 feet you'll ever climb. It's called Misery Hill. And you don't even know how your legs can move, and you can't breathe at 14,000 feet. But the commitment, you feel like a spirit or something pushing you to the top, and you get there. So you have to be all in with whatever you're doing. And with marriage, that's one of the places I learned that. I would jump all in, and it was my life, right? And then so one day, my first wife, I found out she was having an affair with a veterinarian she was working for, and I knew them both. And I bring this up because I know a lot of guys have gone through this.
Yeah.
I found out, I found a bunch of letters he'd written to her. So I sat there for weeks holding on to this, torturing myself. And I thought about, and I was all in. I thought we were going to be together till I was dead, 80, 90, 100 years old. And all of a sudden my life was over. I felt like it was over. And I went into a depression. And I'm not a person who gets depressed. And I went into a 6-month depression where I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. And I remember I went and confronted him, and I was even going to kill him. I thought about it. I actually planned it out. Didn't do it. He's alive. But I was serious. Went through all these emotions, and they've been married now. She married him, and they've had kids. They were meant to be together. Now, after 6 months, I went through it. I woke up one day and I was okay. And I remember something that really helped me through that too, is that there was a couple of people who, and I realized my sister passed away too at 42 in my arm. She died. And when you have these big wounds, like the loss of a marriage or the loss of someone you love, like my sister, the individual you need to talk about it. And there's no fixing it. I go back to what we were talking about earlier, listening. There's a couple of people in my life in both those times that just sat there and let me talk. And literally, I would tell the same story over probably 100 times. They must have been in the back of their head going, just shut up. But no, they were present for me. And that gave me the healing I need. And in both times, one day I woke up and I was okay. I was just okay. Like I ran it through my system and moved on in my life. But I never quit on myself. I think a lot of people, when they go through difficult times or challenges, at some point they give up on themselves. And I always believed in that masterpiece, creating my life. And I believed in myself, and not from an ego out of control point of view. You have to love yourself to go through life. And I do like myself. I always did. And so I made sure when I got out of it, I got back on they say you get bucked off a horse. The only way you're ever going to ride it again, you got to get back on it, or the horse is never going to let you on. And I did. I got back on the horse and kept creating life. And through that difficulty, I'll wrap up with this part.
No.
That difficulty is I never stopped functioning. I kept working. I stayed engaged in life. That was a real key too, I think.
I think you just nailed it. Yeah. Yeah.
I trusted in something bigger.
And you've shared something like that a few times in the podcast. And I think that's what another thing that sticks out, and I imagine this is connected, I'd love to hear more about it. But when you said earlier, like in part, it's about like nature is about receiving, to receive, to be open to receive, to be open to trusting. You and I were talking about this before the podcast, like everything's going to be okay. Is there any insight you can provide around how does one practice receiving in nature? Like what are some, think about like the modern guy, again, working, let's just say a 9 to 5 or, living in a city, et cetera. How does one go out and practice being open and receiving? Is there 1, 2, or 3 steps or actions that you can share for someone to step into more of that?
I think one of the most important things is it has to be personal. And so I would say one thing is, for any guys that are listening or anybody who's listening, one of the things I write about in that book I wrote, The Earth Caretaker Way, is create a front and backyard nature habitat. You want it to be personal. Like, so if you plant trees, if you plant flowers, if you create a butterfly garden, if you feed birds and you watch them and you spend time with them and enjoy that they're enjoying, if you put out a bird bath and enjoy that they're enjoying it, that becomes personal. And that's where that deep listening and connection comes from. And it's personal. The other way is if you're lucky enough to live somewhere where you can go out in the woods, find trees. Trees are one of the great beings that kind of bridge the two worlds together, the human world and the nature world. Trees are one of those extraordinary beings that can do that. And I get teared up thinking about it, because trees, I've had so many trees in my life that are as important to me as anything else, including people I've been in my life. So find trees that speak to you and sit with them and be with them. And it's classic meditation skills. Learn to clear your mind as much as you can from all the gibberish and be as present as you can with a tree or with any natural environment. Water, mountains, anything is fine, but trees are so personal. Clear your mind, be as present as possible. And then another step to take it even further is, we call this grokking. I think this word came from a famous book, which I can't remember the name now. But grokking is when you literally become another being and see and experience the world from that being's point of view. So it's the willingness to be the tree.
Like a shape-shifting of
Yeah,
sort?
kind of.
Okay.
It could be that. It's a willingness to be the tree and see the world from that point of view that opens the heart and connects, whether how successful you are or not with it. But it's a shamanic skill that is for anyone, for everyone. And you can even do it with people. I mean, empathy is one of the great gifts human beings have. The ability to feel what another being feels, walk in another being's shoes, right? The famous statement. And so that's a huge one. And then this is the part, back to your question, connecting with nature deeply, is we're in a world where everything's so boom, 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 quick. It doesn't work that way with nature. You've got to be willing to go for a walk and you don't have to constantly be on your phone. Put the damn thing away. You got to be willing to go out and sit for 2 or 3 or 4 hours and just be without doing. It's a famous statement. Would you rather be a human being or a human being doing? I'd rather be a human being. So, and that's, again, it's hard in this modern culture because we're not used to that. If you've been raised with meditation in your life, the idea of it, that helps. Yeah, but
which
again,
nearly nobody has in the West, like very few.
Very few Westerners even know what meditation is.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't mean that as a put down. It's so you have, in other words, and you have to just put your time into nature. The last thing I can think of is nature teaches through experience. It's not at all even close to being all intellectual. So you've got to just be there. And if you go out in the woods or nature or your yard or wherever nature is, open yourself up to being as present as possible, letting it in. That's what you have to do. And it's putting the time in over and over and over, repeating it and trusting. And I guess what I was going to say is be a student. Like if you go to school and a teacher's there, you're a student. When you go out in nature, be a student. Be willing. In other words, be willing to be taught. So much of that teaching is not like you and me talking. It's subliminal from experience. And then it just shows up in your life like our Native American ancestors called it, as your medicine. One example I can give you is I'm a nature photographer. I've been doing that since I was 12.
Phenomenal nature photographer. Like I don't know if we can put some pictures of some of your stuff. It's like,
That's the big one.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
But all of those pictures that I've taken are, to me, sacred moments in nature. So when I go, I'm spending time with the experience, like a sunset, for example. I'll go before and watch the light change and notice all the colors, the shapes, and then I'll notice the actual sunset. And then often, like if I'm watching a sunset, if there's people there, like maybe on the coast, they all leave when the sun sets. The best is the hour after. That's when the light changes to dark, and it's so beautiful. So all of that time, I'm soaking that up. And so when you get me, like here, or the students get me when they come to the school, the book, I wrote the book, right? Blah, blah. So that's all of those sunsets, all of those photographs, everything I took, and that's just photographs. They're getting all those too. They are me. So that's right, you and me right here. You're getting every photograph I ever took, if that makes sense, because it lives in me. And that's my medicine, right? So what people have to understand, if you live a life of hatred, negativity, anger, and those are all real feelings that we all have, but if they're your main line of living, then that's how you show up in the world. That's your medicine. And you can counter it by letting nature be a healer, by just being what it is.
Yeah, there's a specific practice that you mentioned in the Earth Caretaker way, and part of what I'm hearing is time under tension, like enough time, like not rushing and being out there enough to especially just let some of, like it takes time, like even coming up here. I got a busy work week. My wife and I were traveling on work. And so it's taking me, I've only been here for less than 24 hours in Shasta, but it's taking my body and everything time to just shed some of the world that I'm coming from. and really ground down at a deeper level. But that time under tension, that time is a big thing that comes up. And in the book, you talk about a sit spot and as a tool or a practice. And one of the last retreats when we were here, we did, I think it was like a 5 or a 6 hour sit, until midnight or what, as like a mini vision quest. And it was, for me, it was super powerful. It was actually, some of the guys said it was one of the most challenging things that they did on the whole retreat. But you talked about a sit spot. So can you explain how that fits in? And if someone wanted to create that, what could that look like for them?
Sure. It's a hugely important thing. And it could be a lot of different ways to do it.
Mm-hmm.
One way is, I often teach in the school, is wherever you live, either if you can have a woods that are safe, that nobody's going to mess with it, or in a yard, especially if you're creating an Earth Caretaker garden in a yard, create a spot that maybe has some water there, maybe has where birds can come in, a tree that you really love near that. It's a place that calls to you, that when you look at it, you just know it's home. You know you got to be there. And that's, again, it could be intellectual, but it's more of a feeling, like you feel it, you just know. And then you create the spot. Maybe put a chair there, or you sit on a stump or a rock, and then maybe you build a altar, maybe like a nature art piece that is an example of your love of nature, the reflection of your love of nature. So you make it beautiful out of the rocks you find there, and the leaves and the flowers, and it's a place you go to over and over. And each time you say hi to the plants, you say hi to the tree, watch the spiders, watch the ants. Make it a sacred place. You don't kill anything, even a mosquito. If they fly in, that's sacred. Get to know them. Spend time with them. Often the greatest teachers, which we ignore so much, are the insects. They come into our space, share the world with us. We either want to kill them or get rid of them. They're often the most amazing beings. We just completely ignore them. We all want the dolphins and the bears and the whales to come and join us. Insects are saying, here I am. So, and it's going back over and over each time you go deeper into that sit spot. That it becomes sacred space. And literally, sometimes we used to do this. We'd have people in our nature awareness class do a sit spot, and they do it 2 days in a row for half a day. And then we come to their spot, me and another teacher, and we ask them to tell us the story of the spot. And you can't believe some of the stories they've witnessed, like with the insects and things like that, or make-believe stuff, magical things. And we're learning as they're telling us, like, how well they observed it. And then I give them an assignment to go off, and we add tracks to their site. We make changes. We add things to it. And then we have them go back. If we took rocks and things, we put them in a bag, give it to them, and later in the afternoon they go back to try to see all the changes. And then we go back and see what they discovered. And one of the things I discovered through that is, if we mess with it too much, people get angry. They want to protect their spot. It becomes sacred to them. Our earth, sacred. The human race needs so badly to do that now for our planet, right? But that's the planet right there, your sit spot. So that was an incredible teaching for me. And the other thing is, you can have temporary sit spots. It's important. It's great to hike and explore, but it's wonderful to sit. And as you sit in the woods somewhere in nature, calm your being down, a little meditation, so you're not putting out this intense energy like me, and all of a sudden you notice that the earth comes to you. The butterflies show up. The birds come to check you out. The raccoon comes and looks. The world comes to you. Human beings, we tend to be very loud, busy, even with our bodies when we're not talking. We make a lot of noise. When we eliminate that and we stop, then nature comes back, and it becomes, moments happen where you truly feel, this is your ultimate dream, that you are one with the earth, not separate. And so many of human beings today, whether we admit it or not, we don't even know it intellectually, we don't feel connected to the earth. We feel separate. And when you finally reclaim what I call your birthright, to be a child of the earth, and you feel that deep heart is huge connection. That is one of those life-changing, defining moments. But then you have to keep doing it, right? You got to keep going to nature, And that's why I say, as much as you can also create Earth Caretaker Gardens, it helps for people in suburbia and cities. And
is that right there reminding people that they're not separate from nature, they are nature? Is that the core or a core message in the book? Or like, what would you say, whether it's the book or your life, as we bring today's show to a close, what would you say is the core message that you're living now and moving forward and have lived to get out there?
The Earth Caretaker Way, the book, it's about just what I said. It's about understanding. I'll just take it really back to, I think it was in 1968. I think I write about it in the book somewhere. It was such a project to write a book. I can't even remember half what I wrote. 3 men, probably 20 years old. Think about 20-year-olds today. In a capsule, take off from Cape Canaveral and fly to the far side of the moon. That alone, talk about taking risks. I mean, I could rock those 3 guys, and what amazing 3 men they were. And they get to the far side of the moon, and the moon lights up from the sun, and it's dead. It's beautiful, but it's dead. And off in the distance, they see the Earth rise up. It's the first time human beings really ever saw that from the outside, our Earth. And what they knew immediately, and these were scientists, these guys, they weren't necessarily nature freaks. They knew it was a living being. It was blue. It was white. It was full of life. They knew it in their hearts. You can do readings from what they've talked about. I think they were all like 93, 2 or 3 years ago. They were on the cover of Time magazine. And I thought about it because their picture was there, and they were holding up a picture of the capsule. And when they came back, when they came back, everything changed. Earth Day started. The world started to celebrate the Earth more. Environmental groups came about more. They did more work. It was this chain reaction. And it's a huge, huge part of what I think that book is about, is understanding on every level that the Earth is a living being, that we are living beings on it, that we belong is a huge one. We all often, too, in this modern world, as we look at the destruction the human race has done to the Earth, and it's been serious and continuing, we often eat ourselves up in some way. We don't think we're a part of it. We're separate from it. But we are a part of it. We are a part of it. And as we own and claim that, we will treat it better. I mean, you can look at individuals that hurt their own bodies, right? Eventually, with alcohol or something like that, or drugs. And eventually, you learn that your body's sacred. You clean that up and you take care of it. That's what we're in that process now, human beings. And I remember as a kid, I'd have a bunch of friends, and I had really dear friends in high school, and we loved the Earth. We grew up in the 68 to 72 was our high school years. It was the height of that time of celebrating the Earth. We were all nature freaks, and I remember we used to have this weird game we'd play where we'd imagine if we had a button, if we could push it to get rid of all humanity, would we do it? Think about that, kids. And I wanted to push that button. Some of my buddies would do it quickly. I could never do it. And I didn't know why. Because humans were destroying what we loved. And, of course, we were humans, too. We were driving cars and everything, too, right?
Right.
But, so, I couldn't push that button. And now I know why. Because I truly believe we're supposed to be here. We are gifts to this planet, and we're like 10-year-old kids let loose in a candy store, right? With Noah, we're learning. We're in that growth. And as dark and difficult as things are right now, I want to say this to the listeners. I have hope. I'm a person of hope. One of my heroes just died 3 days ago, Jane Goodall. I don't know if you've even heard of her. Jane Goodall, when I was going back to my beginnings in the early 70s, working at Marine World Africa USA with elephants and chimps, she left England and went to Africa, worked for a guy named Leakey, a scientist, and studied chimpanzees. And she lived with them. She moved in and lived with them. And see, this is, you don't know who Jane Goodall is.
No.
This is someone everybody should know. It's their household name. It makes me sad. And it's not a put down. Don't get it wrong. But she died at 91. She was still doing 300 talks a year. Died in her sleep peacefully. And she fought for the earth her entire life. Started out, she moved in with wild chimps and became friends with them. I remember I met her in my early years at Marine World because she had a bunch of chimpanzees at Stanford University, and she wanted to meet trained chimps. So we met and visited and spent a lot of time together. So when she died the other day, I cried because one of the true heroes of the world, one of the true examples of an amazing human being. And she's being forgotten, right? And so I go back to our life. The Earth Caretaker way, it's about developing that deep relationship with the earth and then putting it into action, being involved with the earth, doing good for the earth, and hence that comes back to doing good for ourselves, and we all win. And to wrap up, is it doable? Yes. The problems our earth faces, going back to me having hope, I think actually as challenging as technology can be, it's part of the solution for the future. And I think technology is like the human being or anything else. It can have a light or a dark side, right? Technology can be magnificent. But more than anything, it's the masses of the human being coming together for the earth. I kind of look at like World War II. It was one of the darkest times in the semi-modern world. The world was being taken over by crazies. And the world came together and stopped it in 5 years. We need that kind of coming together where all countries, all people come together in the Earth Caretaker way for a higher purpose. And I think we're just right on the edge of that. We're just in so much of our own crap now, but that can go away quickly. So I have hope. And if I'm wrong and we just keep screwing it all up, then the truth is, if I just come from straight truth, the earth's going to oust us, and she'll do it all over again. It's just a reality. There's this incredible book written called The Sixth Extinction. And I guess science has been able to prove that 5 times in history of terrestrial life on Earth, before humans, the world lost 80 to 90% of what was living here. The last one was the dinosaurs, when a asteroid hit in the Gulf of Mexico and darkened the skies for 2 years, and 80% of life ended. And look what the earth came back to. This. So the woman who wrote the book, The Sixth Extinction, says, the sixth extinction, this hit me, man, is the human race. We are the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. But the difference is, the asteroid couldn't stop. We can stop. We can change it. We have the ability. The question is, what will do it? We don't know yet. But I'm hoping that book starts a movement and helps. I'm hoping that book starts a movement and helps. And I'm one person. There's zillions of people. We also get lost in the news, and we don't realize there's Jane Goodalls out there everywhere today.
Right.
There are people everywhere doing good. They're not famous. They're not in the front of us all the time, right?
Well, I mean, in today's entire conversation, like, I feel you. Like, you're sitting right here, but the conviction in your voice, the emotions that come up when these matters that are really true to your heart, you let them flow. Like, it's something that's getting transmitted to me. And I think that's one of the things that I really am taking away from today's conversation. It's like, commitment is absolutely paramount, and also how we live, and we don't really realize, or maybe I don't realize as much as I could, just living this philosophy to the best of my ability out in my own way gets transmitted to others. Like just being you is one of the major reasons why I keep coming back up here. It's who you are. It's how you live. It's the conviction in your voice, the fierceness to protecting the earth. Like that is something, having grown up in suburban America, like that's not something I grew up with. That's something I'm growing into. And so to be around you and to bring the men here so that they can, even if you said nothing, like there would be a ton of teaching. So like truly thank you for living this way and in many regards showing what's possible, and also giving like the young folks of today, like in a few years, my son, the ability to come into this. Like there is no greater gift than I could think. Like no greater gift that as a father I want to pass on to my son. I want him to be loved. I want him to have a riskful but also safe life. And I want him to experience life, and I want him to feel connected to nature. So, thank you for being a teacher to me and teacher to so many. I appreciate you very much. So, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to keep going.
Let's go.
Yeah. Part of this elder thing is, how long can I go? And Jane Goodall, 91. She never stopped. I'm not stopping.
Hell yeah. Well, Tim, thank you again. Appreciate you. And then on behalf of the listeners, we appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh.
I hope.